welcome everybody to our new Read What You Want book club for October. And let's get started. What have you guys been reading? Have you been keeping busy?
Oh, I've been reading excellent books. I'm reading The Storyteller of Casablanca, which is an excellent book. Wonderful story. And the other one I read that I highly recommend is More Than You'll Ever Know.
Who's that by?
That, Shirley?
Good question, but
Doesn't matter.
it's an excellent book, and you just can't put it down.
More Than You Ever Know. What's
More
it
Than
about?
You'll Ever Know.
Yeah, what's it about? Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, it's about a narcissist woman who has a double life. She has a family in one city and a lover in another, and then she marries a second one, but has like two different lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to give you any more because it'll take away.
Okay. It looks like it's by Katie Gutierrez. Right. She has a great name.
But The Storyteller of Casablanca is a wonderful, I have it here.
Is that remember there was a movie on this, remember, with the guy, he had two wives in two different cities?
No.
It's too old for you. Clifton Webb played.
Really?
Yes, he had and it was a comedy because he kept getting screwed up, you know. He had two wives, two children, many children. Yeah.
So The Storyteller of Casablanca, what's that one about?
It's about two different people in Morocco, and it's just the story intertwines. It's just a beautiful story.
Okay.
Is it a love story? A love story, Shirley?
Not really. It's experiences of a 14-year-old girl and Morocco in 1941 and her family. And she leaves a diary under the floorboard. And then 70 years later, this couple comes to Morocco because he came for business. Their marriage is not great, and she finds the diary and reads it, and like her life is sort of renewed because of the story. It's just an excellent book. It's a very heartwarming story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good. We can always use heartwarming.
And then my cousin told me about this book called The Husband's Secret.
By Leanne Moriarty?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I hope you guys were either happily married, or I don't know, but I'm like getting depressed, and I've never been married.
Just to be the thought of bigamy.
Why. I see why I didn't. I said, they're going to write all these books about me.
She's
I read The Husband's
This
Secret.
is just fiction.
I liked it.
This is fiction.
Yeah, I remember reading The Husband's Secret. Yeah, I think I remember reading it. It was very good.
This was
Rona, you read a lot.
You do read a lot, Rona. What have you been reading?
Oh my God. For some strange reason, I have been reading the opposite of heartwarming books. And I love Shirley's picks. I love the and Picot and all those crazy nonsense books. But I read, my sister's been telling me, she lives in New Jersey and she's an avid reader. I read a book called Red Notice. I don't know if you've heard it, by Bill Browder. And it's really about, in other words, how I became Putin's #1 enemy. It's a true story of this lawyer who uncovered all kinds of corruption in Russia. And Putin was, of course, involved. And because of what's going on in the war and with the Ukraine and the war in Russia, it gives you a background of how corrupt Russia is. And it was like almost like a history lesson. And he put in place this, it's called the Baginski's law, where oligarchs and rich people in Russia who steal money from the people, it's still happening now, are not allowed to use their money in the States. And as retaliation for that, Putin stopped the stopped the adoptions of Russian children, if you remember, years ago. And I kept saying, oh, that's why that happened. You know, I remember reading you couldn't adopt children from Russia, and people were so upset. And this book, it was almost like a history lesson, but a very interesting, not heavy, like not that you're in school. But especially with today, I feel when I hear the news about Ukraine and Russia and Putin, I've got background on why they're doing this. I found it very interesting, so opposite from the books I read, you know, the ones that are heartwarming and loving and sorry, Roseanne, happy husbands and wives and all that. Half of them get divorced, so don't worry, Roseanne, it's not as perfect as you think it is.
No.
And it was just a very interesting book that way. And another one I read, it's called The Invisible Wall, a love story that broke barriers. A 96-year-old man actually wrote a book at 96 about his life living in England in the early 1900s, how the Jewish people lived on one side of the street and the Catholic people lived on the other, and their interactions and everything. And that also shows you about racism, what's going on in the world today. Nothing's changed. It was a wonderful book, written a 96-year-old, amazing. I couldn't put it down.
What's it called?
It's lighter than this Red Notice, but it's very, very interesting of how these two different communities, Jewish and Catholic, and it was before the war, how they interacted with each other. And in one case, one Jewish girl fell in love with somebody across the street who was Catholic, and they weren't allowed to get married, and everything that happened. And it shows you even today, life has not changed. You know, those two books I found very timely.
What's the name of the book again? That sounds interesting.
What's the name of it?
You would love it, and you couldn't believe he's 96 years old and he remembered ever. It's called The Invisible Wall, a love story that broke barriers. And his name is, oh my God, hold on, let me just see what his name is. Harry Bernstein.
He probably kept a diary, which is great.
He kept a diary. Like, so at one point, like I think they said maybe some of the things he may have embellished a little bit, but he remembered enough. I mean, that, and it was very interesting. But as I said, I found both these books very timely in what's going on in the world today. Completely different from all the other books I've read. I don't know if I'd want to read this on a constant basis. You know, you want to like lose yourself in a book like that, you know, you said, Shirley, and the more than you ever know, that it's like a completely different thing. But
Right.
If you want something, sometimes I find when you read, it's good to read something that you learn from, you know, you learn from it. Reading isn't only just to lose yourself in this fun little book that you forget about. These two books I haven't forgotten about, but some of the others, you know, the light ones I've forgotten about. And this was just something I found very interesting about myself. Maybe you'd all feel that way too. I don't know. What do you think, Katie?
Well, I think we go through phases, right? Like this is, I do read nonfiction. I read more fiction than nonfiction, but when I read nonfiction, it takes me longer to read it, and I don't necessarily read it all in one go.
I agree with you.
So like,
you can put it down, put it this way. You can put it down.
And I mean, some of it too, it's that, like, again, that absorption of all the information, all the facts, because I'd mentioned a couple of meetings ago that I'd been reading All the President's Men. And
nice.
All the President's Men, it's great,
so much.
of course, but also like was so confusing at the beginning, trying to get all the characters straight, all the people. Like I'm not very knowledgeable about political organization and everything. And so I was joking that the television program, The West Wing, did not entirely prepare me for all of the ins and outs at
Exactly.
the White House. So I did have to keep flipping back and like to be like, who's this person again? And who's that
Right.
person?
There's
And
so
where did
many
it-
characters that were involved.
But then you sort of get into the narrative. And so that was something like more political. And again, like timely, like good to understand this sort of basis of how we get to where we are today, right? Like today on the radio on the way into work, I heard someone was talking about, you know, someone else who had written this or who performed the song like for their kid, because they were like, you know, it's like we all rely on sort of the next generation to be able to hopefully repair some of the nonsense that's going on that our leaders are doing in the world today. And
Mhm.
they made that kind of a comment, and I thought, yeah, but I think that's always the case. That's always the case. Like we never like I was trying to think of when was the last time that we were like, oh really, the government's really doing a great job for the common person. You know, like a lot of the time it does end up seeming much more corporate interests, more and then we're like, oh well, hopefully it'll get fixed at some point.
You're right. You know, I just want to ask you, and then I'll be quiet and let somebody else talk. All these books that are being written in the States about by the political parties that are involved in everything that's going on with Trump and all that ad nauseum, everybody comes out with a book. They don't say anything at the time, but they all come out with a book. I mean, to me, how do you feel about that? I find it takes the book reading, it takes the joy out of it when you know that somebody is writing a book. You couldn't care less. He just wants to make money. God knows if he's lying. What do you think of all these books that everybody, Peter Navarro and Trump and Mary Trump, and all of them are writing? What do you think, Katie, about that? Is that
Well, let's do a little roundtable on that. I mean, it's an interesting question. Go ahead.
It's not easy to write a book. It's not easy to write a book. They're not writing it because they're going to make money. Some might, but I don't think it is hard to write a book unless they're ghost written or whatever.
I was going to say, they might not actually be the ones writing it.
And that's right.
Exactly. Is it a ghostwriter writing for them? And is it strictly for money, or do they want to get their story out? And how do you know if it's true, if it's not a lie?
Look at Mary Trump. She had a story, something to get it out. Now it's true. She was looking for getting some money, but she deserved. I mean,
well, she's a psychologist.
She had to say. Everybody was, you know. I think that if people write a book, they want to say something. And I don't know about being so. Yes, you're right. A lot of them make money, but then again, I think of James Patterson as somebody who's just. I don't read any of his books anymore because they're just.
He keeps churning them out.
And that's somebody who's making money.
Right. That's true.
Stuart Woods, I love Stuart Woods. Now, you know, I wouldn't. I mean,
Jacqueline Suzanne, you know, yeah.
That's
But
right.
what about like Prince Harry?
Yeah, that's. But you know, this is where it's very hard to write a book. But you're right. Some people are doing, but it's up to the public to buy it or not. You know, they have all these. My friend collects self-help books. To me, that's sad. That's going to a public that is desperate for help. Diet books. Right. So I look at that as worse because my friend buys all these books because she thinks there's an elixir somewhere, and that's it. They're aiming for a certain group. I don't know about how they, you know.
Well, at the same time, with things like self-help books, like it's advice, right? And this is, as with everything in life, you can take it or leave it. And some things might work for you and some things might not. Some things might not work for me. That would work for you, Shirley, or some things might.
Okay, but they do it because they want to make some money and they want to attract a certain group. So you know, to me, that's hurt. You know,
and the ones with the great titles too, of just like how to be happy, or it's just like, sure,
or how to be a millionaire in a week.
Yeah. Chicken soup for the soul.
That's a good one.
Chicken soup for the soul. Right away, chicken soup. Oh, chicken soup. Oh, I'm Jewish. I better buy the book.
So Carol's joined us. Hi, Carol. We're just talking right now about Rona asked how we feel about sort of the more political books that are written, like nonfiction, that are written from the different like different players in the political parties, and whether or not they are like just sort of money grabs, or whether they're actually trying to get their perspective across, or what. I mean, I think that there's I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean,
However,
of course they
okay, I just sent you an email
Mhm.
because I'm doing a photos webinar, which I really need on another library. So I may go back and forth with you, but I'm certainly looking forward to the write-up. Okay, so I don't know how much I could follow you this morning.
That's all right. I'm also going to say that now that we're recording the meetings, my write-up is going to be really brief. It's just going to have like sort of pictures of the different books, because and it'll have the link to the YouTube video so that anyone who's missed it can see.
Okay, so thank you. That's great. Enjoy, everybody. I'm going to leave. Okay, and learn more about how to transfer my photos.
We'll miss you, Carol.
Hi and bye, Carol.
Thanks. Enjoy. I see you're a small group. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, dear.
Oh, can I say there's another book that I read? It's part of I know, Rona, you probably read it, the Mount Sinai Book Club, The Second Life of Murray West.
Mm-hmm.
No, I never read that.
I know
No?
it's on a big wait list here right now.
Really?
Although
Yeah.
I think it's available on Cloud Library. Last I checked, it was available digitally from the library.
What's it called again, Shirley?
The Second Life of Murray West. It's about
Is that a true
a
story?
leper colony.
Oh. Mhm.
I didn't join the Mount Sinai Book Club
No,
this year.
why should you when you have this one? This one's so much better. Is it a true story, Shirley?
I don't think so.
Oh,
No, it's
I don't
fiction.
think so.
It's fiction, but it's yeah, it looks like a good one. But I haven't read it either. Not yet.
It's very, I mean, it tells you a lot about the people who have leprosy, but I think that it's, it's, as you said, it's definitely fiction.
and it's a new book? It's a new book?
Yep, came out this year, I think.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. But back to the political sort of discussion. I think it's interesting because I went to see, what did I see? I was watching an interview, I think, with someone recently, and it was about, with Trump, we got a lot of, when Trump was president, we had a lot of talk about fake news and all of this stuff, and how to know what to believe, how to know what actually happened and what hasn't. And a lot of that is wrapped up in information that comes across on the internet. And as a librarian, something that we talk a lot about in our, little closed meetings of librarians.
Oh, you do. That's
is
interesting.
information literacy. So information literacy, again, it's knowing what to believe, sort of to feel out like what has sort of a basis in fact and what doesn't. With the advent of the internet, which has been something that, I mean, really, when you think like this interview made me really think about like, oh yeah, now like most of the news that I get is online, and it is from newspapers or from news magazines like that are fairly reputable with journalists. But at the same time, there's been this long history of issues with journalistic intent as well. Like the nonfiction book that I'm reading right now is a book called Human Kindness, and it's by Rutger Bregman. So Rutger Bregman is, I believe he's Dutch, and he's a sociologist or historian. And he came on my radar a few years ago. He spoke at Davos, the conference, and he sort of brought up the hypocrisy that, at Davos, which was talking about environmental issues and everything, and it was a bunch of billionaires who had flown in on their private jets, like talking about environmentalism. So that put him sort of on the radar of Tucker Carlson, the Fox News host, who I personally, this is my own personal opinion, I do not have very good opinions of. But so Tucker Carlson invited Rutger Bregman for an interview, and he interviewed him, and then he never aired the interview because he didn't like what Rutger Bregman had to say. Now, Rutger Bregman, his people also recorded the interview and they released it.
Oh,
If you'd like a little treat, I do recommend Googling Rutger Bregman, Tucker Carlson, and finding the video, because it's a fun little conversation.
What's his name again?
His name is Rutger, Rutger, Bregman, Bregman. And in his book that I'm reading, Human Kindness, it talks a little bit about, well, what it talks about is how the basis of, like, often when we talk about human nature, we think about like the lowest common denominator and the worst sort of things, like selfishness and everything and how to get ahead. Whereas Rutger Bregman's whole kind of thesis in this book is actually that humankind has developed and evolved mostly because of being kind and being like working together in different ways. So one of the things that he talks about, for example, is the book Lord of the Flies. So how Lord of the Flies, the whole premise behind that is that if you left these kids without any supervision, then they would all basically turn feral and turn against each other, and that's how people are. That's what they would do. But he found he was like, is that really how people are? And he found a historical instance of this group of kids who were shipwrecked on an island for more than a year. And actually, that's not at all what happened. What happened was, of course, they worked together because that's kind of what you have to do. And then he talks about a bunch of other things. I won't go into every single detail. But one of the things that he talked about in terms of, to bring it all back to the journalistic integrity and stuff, is he talked about, what's her name? It was just the anniversary of her death recently. There was a woman in the 50s, I believe, 50s or 60s in New York, who was killed in an alleyway, and they said no one called the police. And this was supposed to be, again,
It was in New
indicative
York, in Queens. And every day I got off the subway at the same subway station she got off.
Yep.
The same apartment buildings are right there. And I had to walk from there to my friend. Let me tell you, some nights it was scary because I can't remember her name because it was on my head. But it was an awful thing because she screamed and yelled and people looked out their windows.
Nobody came and they walked by.
Nobody came to her help.
But so, okay, but this is the story that everyone knows. Now, actually, so one of the things that Rutger Bregman talks about is like, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. So what happened was, yes, she was, the police were called. The police didn't come. But that wasn't part of the narrative. So what actually ended up happening was that a few different people did call the police. Other people didn't because they thought that, and this was the problem with like the bystander effect, like this idea of the bystander effect, is everyone thinks someone else is doing something. But the police had been called, the police didn't come. And when different neighbors tried to set the story straight with journalists, they didn't publish that because that wasn't the narrative. That wasn't what was selling. So in terms of what to believe, how we know what to believe and which perspective that should be put forward with these political books, I think, of course, everyone wants to sell their own ideology. And I don't mean it in a nefarious way either. It's the same as with most things. Like, we believe the things that we believe because we think that that's right, right? So someone who, and especially like in terms of political parties, then they want to get elected. And so they're saying, no, we're the good guys. Everyone thinks they're the good guy. And they want more people to believe that they're the good guys.
you know, I don't want to get off topic because we're talking about books, but I don't know if anybody's been watching the Murdoch. There's a series on Rupert Murdoch, the Murdoch family. It's on CNN. I've been following it. Well, I mean, you talk about what can you believe, you read the newspaper or whatever. Rupert Murdoch owns most of all the newspapers in the world. I mean, you cannot, I think 75% in England. He owns Fox News. It is unbelievable. He just bought the Wall Street Journal for $600 billion. And he takes these papers and puts his spin on it. And everybody, he's conservative. He's like Fox News is, and political and conservative, and he tells people what he wants them to believe, and that's dangerous too. I know it's not books, but it's the written newspaper. It's the same thing.
And that's the Koch brothers too, right? Like this is like, it's all sort of, you know, anything you go back far enough, then like we hear a lot from right-wing pundits sort of like, you know, the leftist agenda and stuff like that. But I mean, I think that everyone does kind of have some kind of agenda.
Yeah.
It's not to say that it's necessarily bad. It sounds bad. But I think that, again, it's that everyone has something that they want everyone else to believe.
Which it didn't happen in our time. Like, you know, 40 years ago when we read a newspaper, this was the news. Nobody had an agenda.
But so this is it. So
I
again,
don't agree with you. I don't agree with you.
I don't either.
No,
I'm afraid.
because we didn't have the facilities to find out the truth. But guaranteed they were lying left, right, and center and using their own way.
I mean, the Montreal Star was lying?
Well, I would say a yes, but here, right? Is that yes, but. So I think that because there were fewer news outlets, then they tended towards having sort of more balance. Like they'd have reporters who were on various parts of the spectrum, the political spectrum. And also there was journalistic integrity, I think, meant a little bit more. I agree. But so this the
John
murder
F.
that I would
Kennedy. John F. Kennedy. God Almighty, we knew nothing.
But this is it too, is that then that also begs the question of how much do we really need to know about different people's, different figures' personal lives? Like we know so much more now, but then like, does that actually impact the way that they do their jobs? Right. But talking about like what used to happen. So Kitty Genovese, that was the name of the woman who was murdered in New York, with the bystander effect and everything. And again, it's when you like, so this guy Rutger Bregman then like went through like all these past records and found, like, again, like the history, but still what is said, it's the same as he talks about a couple of other, like, again, scientific experiments as well, and the ways that they have proven like that people are terrible. And then he's like, but we actually went through the files, and when we looked through the files, we saw that actually it's not as cut and dry as what was presented. Because sometimes,
why didn't the police come to Kitty Genovese?
So when they didn't come at first, they thought it was because she was drunk. So that's why no one responded then. And then it was like,
but how did they assume that she was drunk?
Because it was in the evening and it was her stumbling, like whatever the message was that they had received, like the call that they had received was or that it was, you know, that it was a it was a domestic abuse sort of situation. Again, at that time, a domestic abuse situation would not have warranted.
Nobody believed the woman. Nobody believed the woman, of course, in that time.
So anyway, that's just to say that
that's interesting. I'm going to look for that video. I want to see that video.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about it in that video, but the book is called Human Kindness. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm really enjoying it. But that's the nonfiction book that I've been reading, and now I'll move over to lighter fare.
Yeah.
I exchanged a couple of emails with Rona last week, and I said, like, I've just been tearing through a bunch of like my own kind of like, I tend to lean a little bit towards kind of weird stuff. So after I read sort of my more literary books for the last meeting, then I sort of was like, I'm just gonna have some fun. So I read this one, I think actually, Roseanne, you might like. This is called Claire Dewitt and the City of the Dead. And it's a mystery, but it's not your regular sort of mystery. It's a little bit dark. It takes place in New Orleans. And it's like the detective in it, Claire Dewitt, is it's like she's almost, it almost leans a little bit towards that Buddhist mystery book that I was talking about a little while ago. But that one was very light. This one is darker and also has a lot more substance abuse in it. but it's like looking at like solving mysteries through the interconnectivity of like the universe kind of thing. And so it takes place in New Orleans just after Katrina, and it deals with a particular school of detection. And I found it really enjoyable. I read another one of hers afterwards because I enjoyed it so much, but it's weird. This one is also another weird one. So it's called Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. And it's based on, like, it's based in this town. It's sort of like Las Vegas used to be. You know, Las Vegas was, you know, it was kind of the Wild West, where like then like there were rules, no real rules. So in this city, then there's no real rules, and it's sort of corporate run and owned. And there's this main character's dad, who she didn't know at all, but her biological father dies and leaves her like zillions and zillions of dollars and basically control over this large part of this city. And it was just a really fun ride. It was basically like watching an action movie, which I enjoy. And then I came a little bit back to more normal, but not quite. I don't know if anyone here has read The Family Fang by Kevin Wilson. So this was his big book. This was made into a movie with Nicole Kidman a few years after it came out. And it's odd. So it made me think of a couple of other books that I read again years ago. There's a book called Geek Love by Catherine Dunn about someone who grows up in a freak show, but it's still like really rooted in sort of real feelings and real sort of human relationships and interactions and everything. But this book, The Family Fang, it's about these two kids who are the children of essentially performance artists who grow up in all these sort of like very odd situations where their parents are just trying to make things sort of happen. So this takes place as the children are adults, and one has become an actress and the other is a writer. And definitely dysfunctional, but interesting again in terms of the relationships between the different family members. And it's about basically finding out, trying to figure out how to, you know, actualization of self or what have you. I read another Kevin Wilson book a few years ago called, I can't remember the name of it. But it's the basis of that other book is it's a person who is taking care of, she's like a caregiver to these two kids, and these two kids just spontaneously combust periodically, like they can like just light themselves on fire. Again, really, it's like I said, I've been reading some weird books, but weird, but really, it's not out. It's not like out in the clouds sort of thing. Like it seems Kevin Wilson seems really rooted in like, again, human nature and looking at the way that people interact and how we all cope with different sort of levels of strangeness and levels of reality. And then I got it. this book came in for me, which I was very excited about. It's the new Elizabeth Strout book. So it's called Lucy by the Sea. I came in and I started to read it, and then I realized that I hadn't read one of her other books dealing with the same character, and that it had been a really long time since I'd read My Name is Lucy Barton, which is the first book in it. So instead I started rereading My Name is Lucy Barton, and I'm going through the whole oeuvre before I get to Lucy by the Sea. Another good, I like human nature.
What is it about? What are they about?
Well, so My Name is Lucy Barton. I'm surprised that you haven't read it, Rona.
I
No,
read it a
I'm not.
long time ago.
Did you? Oh, I must read it. What's it about?
It's a series of sort of interlaced vignettes, like kind of almost short stories. Like you don't have to read them all in order. You can, and they're not all told in chronological order. And it's about this woman, Lucy Barton, and it's just snippets from her life. And I remember when the book came out, and it was really well reviewed, all that stuff, because it is beautifully written. But it's not one of those books where you're like, oh, like, let's get to the, it doesn't have like a story arc climax and then the end, right? Surely, like it's
I don't remember. I remember reading it, but it's a long time ago. But I remember it was strange but interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's her different interactions with different people that she comes across in her life. That's My Name is Lucy Barton.
Right.
And one of the comments that came up often when it first came out was how she's not really a likable character. Now, I disagree, but I get where that comment comes from. It's that she's definitely not a one-dimensional character. Like this is very much a warts and all kind of book. So it talks a little bit about like her interactions with her husband and like different people that she comes across in her life, and like students, because she's a teacher and all this stuff. And she's not like holding people's hands and like spoon feeding them. And she has very little tolerance for nonsense, I guess, for lack of a better word, and to choose a nice word to use in a recording. But I really liked it, and I like Elizabeth Strout's writing. It's well done. And I haven't gotten to Lucy by the Sea yet, because I'm going to read after I finish My Name is Lucy Barton, which I'm almost done. Then I'll go on to her other two. That
I can't remember what books I read because it's been a while, because I was trying to get through this one. And
Which
like
one?
you, I
Diamonds and Deadlines.
This
Oh,
one.
nonfiction. We've got a lot of nonfiction on our docket.
Yeah, but I'm not a nonfiction person. But I wanted, it was interesting because it's a Gilded Age. I've always been interested in the Gilded Age. So this woman is a real person, and she was she was a Rupert Murdoch of the publishing business, and she was a brothel owner. She was a brothel worker. I mean, anyway, but I'm one of these people like you. I don't know how you can get through this, because it was so. I had to finally give up halfway. I'm there, but I can't.
Why?
Because it's too much. You know, like somebody told her how many pages to write or something. She had to write a certain amount of pages. If the book ended there, would have been happy. But I'm not the type who reads every line, right? But if you're the type who reads every second page, great book. Great book.
But this is it too, right?
A lot of fillers.
It depends on the narrative structure, right? I mean, like nonfiction and fiction. There's some terribly written fiction as well. But
I don't know what they say about
sometimes with nonfiction, it seems like they're just trying to get all the facts in. But it's nice when there is a lot of good, like I have read a lot of nonfiction.
Facts. Yeah, she puts in everything that was going on at the same time with all the people. And I want to hear about her. I don't know. Anyway, so I won't give up, because I don't give up a book. But the book I love reading, love it, is The Dog Talking Again. The Dog Talking. I love it.
Who is
The
that?
dog
It's a wonder.
talking. The dog writes the book.
I know. It's David,
Oh,
someone
you're
who wrote that.
kidding.
This one is no. David Rosenblatt doesn't talk. Writes about dogs too, which I've read a whole bunch. But the thing is, the dog's not talking. Here, the dog is talking. The dog
what's-
Oh,
wrote the
that's
book.
such an interesting concept.
The dog wrote the
interesting.
book. That's it. The dog writes the book, and he's the only one who speaks. I mean, no, not the only one who speaks. He hears what other people are saying, doesn't understand sometimes. Like, oh, what? I wanted to read some of the parts, but I just never got. I always keep forgetting where. But it's just terrific because he's from a dog point of view. So it's him writing the book. So he's solving the mystery. He's the one, but you know, he has his master and his master's going around, but he's telling you what the master is doing and what the master is saying and how he understands the master. Of course, you realize that he doesn't really understand the master because they're in innuendos. He doesn't have a good memory. He can only go past the number 2 or 3. So when his master says 3, you want 3 biscuits? I don't remember. Is it 3? Do I want 2? I know I want 2, but I can't remember. Oh, I think 3 is good because I can wait around. I think I have to wait. You know, it's wonderful. I just sit there and smile. You
Well,
know.
this is
Did the artist Spencer Quinn do his homework on dogs? Does he understand dogs? Is it true or like how real is that?
Oh my
'Cause I
God! You
love
have to have
dogs.
had. Did you ever have a dog?
My daughter has a dog that I take care
Okay,
of a
get
lot.
this-
And
get one of these
sometimes
books for
I
her to
wonder
read.
what the dog is thinking and how much the dog knows.
Listen,
did
I
he
know
do
my
anything?
dog was dreaming about a 3-course meal. He would lie down on the bed, go like this, and go. I know what he was thinking. He wasn't thinking of going to the vet, and yet you could
So
take him
it's
to the vet.
tongue-in-cheek?
You were
It's
taking him to the vet.
tongue-in-cheek.
No,
Yeah.
It's
no, it
tongue-in-cheek.
really thinks the way, you know, he can smell things that the humans can't. So, for example,
Mhm.
when his master knocks at a door, nobody answers. So he turns to his dog and he says, "Look, nobody answers." But he says, "Oh no, there's somebody home. I can smell them." So he goes, "Woof, woof, 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 woof," and his master knows him well enough.
Mhm.
You know, knocks the door down and finds the guy, you know, dead. but he was there.
That sounds very interesting, that book. I'd like to
Roseanne?
read that.
Roseanne, did you ever read The Art of Racing in the Rain?
Is that the one with the donkey?
No, it's also narrated by a dog.
No.
Really?
Yeah, it's about a race car driver. And anyway, The Art of Racing in the Rain. At one
Wait a
point
minute,
in
there
the
was a
book-
movie on that.
Yeah, they
I
made it
didn't want to
into a
go
movie.
see it because it was sad. I don't
Yeah, I have some political issues with the story of the book, but I won't get into that too deeply right now. But most of the book was quite enjoyable. And also, last time I was talking about lessons in chemistry, and there are chapters in that are also narrated by the dog.
I'm trying to get it from the library, Katie. They haven't, it's hard to get that book, eh?
It's
I
on
hear
a wait list.
everybody's reading it. It's supposed to be the book of the year.
It's,
can't
I
get
mean,
it.
you will get it. When you get it, you're gonna read it in a day or two. Like, it's a fast read.
Everybody loves it. My sister from New Jersey wrote, she says, "You have to read this book." I said, "We were just told about this book." And then I asked the library and they haven't gotten back to me.
Are you on the list for the large print version as well?
No.
Sometimes what I do for patrons, as long as the large print doesn't bother them, because sometimes it does, but
Yeah.
oftentimes there'll be a
you
shorter
get
wait
that
list.
one. Okay.
There might be a shorter
Well,
wait
I
list
have
on the
time.
large
I
print.
have to read the book that you suggested for next time. What's it called again?
Lab Girl, but it's a
So I have
small
to
book
read that
too.
first.
Lab Girl,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's nonfiction that we will be reading for the next club, but it's a small book. Do I have copies here? I do.
Don't
So
give mine away.
look, it's small.
Yeah,
Yours is
oh,
waiting
okay.
for you upstairs. So it's
Okay.
only like, it's not even 300 pages.
Okay.
Lab Girl? Is that what it's
Lab
called?
Girl. Yeah. By Hope Laren. Do you want me to set a copy aside for you, Shirley?
Sure.
I'll bring it
It's
up
for our
after the
next
meeting.
book club, Shirley. Yeah.
And your
What's
last name
it
is
about?
Nadler, is that right?
Yeah, what's it about?
It's I haven't started it yet because I knew that if I started it before this meeting, then I would start talking about it. And
Oh, okay.
I'm not very good at delayed gratification. So I'll read you the back. I'll read everyone the back for anyone who wants a little taste of next week. Geobiologist Hope, I think it's pronounced Jaren, has spent her life studying trees, flowers, seeds, and soil. Lab Girl is her revelatory treatise on plant life, but it is also a celebration of the lifelong curiosity, humility, and passion that drive every scientist. In these pages, Hope takes us back to her Minnesota childhood, where she spent hours playing in her father's college laboratory. She tells us how she found a sanctuary in science, working with both the heart and the hands. And I'll leave it at that for us.
Okay.
But again, from when it came out, it had great reviews. This is always for the book club books now. I pick a selection of books that I've been meaning to get to. Just always something comes up, and I'm like, that way, whichever one is chosen, we'll at least read it and see what the
Okay.
whoop was about.
So this is for the November?
Yes, for the November book club.
Okay. What date in November?
It is going to be November 8th.
Okay.
So we have this book club, or the book discussion group, whatever you'd like to call it. It stands, usually it's not the second Tuesday of every month, just to make it a little bit easier for us all to keep track of.
When is the book sale?
That I don't know offhand.
Isn't it next week?
It's
Or
soon. I
coming
know
up?
Justin has been. Making everything ready.
Because I volunteered to help and I don't know when I'm supposed to go.
I think it's on the 22nd, 23rd. Next weekend.
Katie, have you ever written a book?
No.
Really?
No, I
Oh.
used to write poetry.
Mhm.
I used to write poetry, and I wrote short stories. I've written one play.
Oh.
But years and years ago. And
Did it make it to Broadway?
no, thank goodness it barely made it out of my classroom that I wrote it for. It was like, I did come across it maybe 10 years ago, and I was like, oh God, absolutely terrible. So
You have no interest in writing a novel?
you know, I really, really, really appreciate the skill that it takes to do. I don't know that I have the patience for it. And also for the stories that sort of come across. Like I've done I think maybe some short stories, but I haven't written in years and years. But some of my poetry I thought stood up that I've came across
Oh, that's
when I
nice.
moved last. Do you write?
Me? Oh no, forget it. Mind you, you know something? I shouldn't say that. Sometimes when people need a speech, like at a wedding or a birthday party or something, they turn to me, and I'm able to say funny things about, like, I'm certainly not a writer, but people have said to me, you're so good at writing certain, like, speeches, funny things, telling about people. So sometimes that's gotten me to think, maybe I could have written something. I never thought of it, in those days. But I do have a little bit of a knack just to writing 4-line poems if it's your birthday and we talk about Kate, everybody laughs. That's basically your like a Hallmark card, I do have a little bit of, I can do it, but I haven't done it in a long time, anyway. But that's really it. I don't think I could write a book.
Well, this is it too, right? There are these knacks that people have. Like one person who writes, for example, a good example would be actually, so Louise Penny, right? Like Louise Penny has written all these Inspector Gamache books, and they're mysteries. And then with like one of her most recent books, of course, she wrote with Hillary Clinton, and it's more of a thriller. And I read it and it was fine. But it wasn't quite like it's a different genre. It's a different way of approaching things. In the same way that storytellers, right? Like I think of, we were talking about nonfiction. There's a memoirist called Mary Carr who I think is absolute genius. Like, I think she's magnificent. And I've read 3, I think, of her memoirs, and I think they're great. And there are also, last week or 2 weeks ago, I went and saw David Sedaris speak. Do you guys know David Sedaris? He's also nonfiction. He's a humorist, but he's a humorist about like his life. And again, it's that ability to like see what's happening sort of in front of you and see the funny and the weird and be able to illuminate it with love too, right? Like with, like, sometimes people are jerks, but still being able to see the funny side of it, but because like approaching it with humor and empathy. So one of the things that David Sedaris, like so he's written, I'd say probably 6 books, 7. But I think 2 years ago, he came out with the book that he released was journal excerpts just from his journal. And then the most recent one is his regular kind of style of kind of like short stories, but they're real, like little anecdotes. And one of the things that he talks about, so his mother passed away a few years ago, but his father passed away over COVID, and he had a more complicated relationship with his father than he had with his mom. And so he writes a little bit about that, and that was one of the things that he read at the reading that I went to. And it's that, like, you were talking earlier, Rona, about liking to learn things from what you're reading. And I do too. I don't think it has to be a nonfiction. I think that I hope that I learn a little bit of something from most of the things that I read. But I've talked before about, like, I just find human nature kind of fascinating, and the ways that we talk to ourselves versus the way that we talk to other people, the way that we interact with the world around us, and like the different relationships that we build and maintain, and the different ways that different people do those things. And this is something that I found, so with this talk, because I have another friend who, anyway, beside the point. This is just like, again, the different relationships that we have with different people, and how there can still be love there, even if it's not necessarily conventionally, or it wouldn't be like universally acknowledged as being like, oh yeah, that's a loving relationship. But it's like, we have to navigate each other's personalities and each other's biases and each other's sort of lived lives and expectations. And family can be challenging sometimes. I'm sure that we could all agree with that we like, family relationships can be challenging, friend relationships can be challenging, but the love is there, and this acceptance of the ways that each other is, and still being able to find ways to move forward. It's
As
nice.
you said, people are different, but you have to appreciate their personalities, even though it's not the same as yours, and like them for their qualities.
Because
So
wouldn't the
true,
world be boring
absolutely.
if we were all the same anyway? What would we talk about? Food and dogs.
Okay with me.
Does anyone have anything on their looking forward to reading list other than Lab Girl?
I'm looking forward to finishing The Storyteller of Casablanca, and then I'll read the Husband's Secret, because I have it, and then hopefully I'll read Lab Girl. I'll pick it up this afternoon.
Okay, sounds good. I better keep it in front of me so that you have it to pick up.
Okay. So where will I find it?
Just at
Or
the front desk.
Okay.
If you ask for it at the front desk, it'll be there under your name.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you always want to read, Katie and Shirley? Are you always reading? And Roseanne, are you always reading, or do you sometimes stop and then you start up again? Like, is it a constant in your life, or How does that go?
It's interesting. You know, sometimes the books come all together. Sometimes the books come all together. You know, when you order them and then they all seem to come at one time. But some books, like one was More Than You'll Ever Know. I had to stop and take a few days to digest that book. And I lent it to my neighbor, and she called me and she said her eyes are burning because she can't put it down. But also,
Does it hit you
you know, when you
personally?
find a book like that, and then you still have to think about it. And the same with The Second Life of Murray West. You know, these books like really leave an impression on you, and you have to think about the why, when, what, how.
Why do they leave an impression? Is it something that you can relate to in your life? Like what makes it?
Because the story is so, either it's so bizarre, or it's so tragic, or it's so heartwarming that you see, you have to sort of go over it.
Or you want to kind of stay in that world in your head for longer.
Right.
That's
But
wonderful.
it's like, that's why reviews are good like this. When in that book, my cousin in Halifax told me about it. And then when I was FaceTiming with her, we had a book review about it. And, you know, it was, and so you bring out the different parts of the books, and everybody's like definition or concept of it is different. But I mean, a book like that, it really stays with you, even though you know it's fiction. But you wonder, like how the author comes up with these stories.
Really?
And the characters too, right? Like there's that influence clearly, like there's got to be some kind of influence from other people that they've come into contact with or whatever. But when they're drawn so fully, when they're able to become real in our minds, then.
Well, I hope that this author had no personal connection to this character.
What's the name of the author, Shirley? What's the name of the author?
Katie Gutierrez. This is for
More Than
You'll Ever Know.
Okay.
I wonder what the men read. I see that the women read these kind of books. What do the men read? Do they?
Well,
I never
that's
see men in
interesting
the
question.
library. I never
You
see
never-
men in the library.
Oh,
I
they're
never see them picking a book.
There are tons of men in the library.
I'm
I see-
sure.
yeah.
But when I go, I don't see anybody. No men.
I mean, I think it all depends on the person, what different people read. I know I'm trying to think of what my partner's reading right now. I think he's reading a mystery, like a cozy mystery. But he also just finished a book, a nonfiction about like the IRA. And I think, again, it's this balance, finding these balances of reading like this heavy, definitely true kind of factual.
My husband also reads, reads political books or books on religion. I find most men read books, not most men, the people I know, nonfiction, you know, not a lovely little story, something that they find interesting in life, either political, religious, or I don't know. Do you find that too? I think women tend to go more into the, you know, the fiction and lovely stories, or this one that you were saying, More Than You Ever Know. Would your husband like More Than You Ever Know, Shirley, as much
No.
as you did? There
No.
you go. There you go. Why?
Not his.
That's
No.
what I'm saying.
But you know which other book I read that really, and I guess it's a true story. It's, book by Leonard Lauder, and talking about Estee Lauder Company, like his mother,
Mhm.
and how
Oh,
she
right.
built up that book. I forget the name of it, but it was beautifully written. And I wondered, like, it was so factual, like he remember all the dates and everything that like she did, and when like Clinique and all the other lines from the Estee Lauder Company came out. I mean, it was a very, very interesting book.
Really?
And it tells you more about the woman herself.
Mhm.
Did you
What do you
did you
think,
read that?
Katie, what do you think with the men that come into the library? What are they reading mostly? Do you notice?
Okay, well, what I noticed
Well-
also, they took away from where they used to have the nonfiction books, the more biographies, they took that shelf away at the library.
No, they have it. They just moved it.
Where'd they move it to?
In the new, are you talking about the new releases?
No, I'm talking
Oh.
about where the new releases, the 7-day books are.
Yeah.
Next to it was always the biographies and everything. I noticed they're not there anymore. At least when I went there, they weren't there.
Yeah,
This
they're still there. There's still new releases with nonfiction. It's that so after COVID, it's just the ways that things have been shifted. So pre-COVID, we had a certain arrangement in our new fiction or in our new releases, and then when we came back, things shifted so that it was like the mystery thriller section was a little bit smaller, and then the nonfiction was right next to it. And now we've moved the nonfiction to another sort of more central tower. So it's floating. It's like it's not on a wall. I think it's in the
Ah.
middle. But also then there's the whole biography section in the library, which takes up an entire wall in nonfiction. With the men who come into the library, it really varies. Like I know one guy who he only reads romance. That's all he reads is
Really?
romance. I
I'd
have
like
some
to
others.
meet him.
I have some others who read a lot of thrillers, mysteries, literary fiction. It's true that we don't have a lot of men, I think, in our book clubs. But
Mhm.
I
That's
talk
Mhm.
with a lot of individual men about individual books, just not in sort of a group setting. So it depends. There's someone that again, there used to be, we used to have a very regular patron who came in. He passed away, but he read fantasy and science fiction. And he and I, like I've said before, like I kind of read everything, and so he was my go-to to talk to about fantasy and science fiction. Yeah, there's a lot of different
history and war. A friend of mine reads an awful lot. He's always reading, but it's all about history and the wars, and that's
Yeah.
all he reads.
Yeah, I can think
Yeah.
of another person who he only reads World War II nonfiction.
Mhm.
Yep. And again, like it kind of loops us back around to what we were talking about with perspective and ideologies, and that the more you read about a different event, or like the same event, but different things about the same event, the more you can see all the different facets, right? Like all the different ways that different people experienced it or thought that it would go, or like the way they thought that it turned out, or whether things went well or badly, or what they think should have been done differently. Like everyone has their own sort of informed ways of living history as well.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Nah, I'd say men are basically the same as women, but slightly different. It depends on the person. Depends on the person.
Not as much in touch with their feelings. Maybe that's why they don't come to a book club, maybe because we tend to go off on tangents and we go into our feelings. Maybe that's uncomfortable for most men,
Well, and I mean, it's a huge cultural reality,
Mhm.
right? Is that the way that women are encouraged, well, girls are encouraged to grow up into being mindful of what is, oh, how do you think this made this person feel? Do you think that's inclusive or whatever? And I think that I was just having this conversation recently with some young parents, and it's like, I mean, there are shifts in the ways that we raise our boys and our girls and the gendered sort of things, right? But this is it. I think we're all trying to aim at populating our world with people who are more mindful of the other people that we share the planet with.
We're still genderizing because 20 years ago, I mean, I quit. I mean, I retired, but I worked up till just before COVID. And I always would ask the kid, grade 5, grade 6, and say, you know, how many of you, because I worked in Verdun. I loved it, you know, like it was my favorite. And I say,
you were a teacher?
Yeah. And I said, but I like the older grades. So I remember saying to the kids, because I had gone to the hospital for surgery, and I was praying that the nurse, because there were lots of men, and I still am not used to seeing a woman bus driver. I'm still not used to it. I still have a problem with the women on the street, the flag women, which I'm amazed. I'm like, you know, I wanted to be a garage mechanic. That's what I wanted. I'm sitting here working with my fingers. I'm making jewelry while we're doing this, and I always wanted to work with my fingers, but nobody was doing garage mechanics. Lisa Rick Christensen, 25 years ago, came to my house.
Terrific. She's terrific. She's on the
came to my house
radio every
25
weekend.
years ago, and we had a meeting. It was a B'nai B'rith women, and she came to my house. She had just started on the radio. She was like, she was like, oh my God, this is what I wanted, but I never could do it. And what happened is I asked the kids, so how many of you would like to be a garage mechanic? You know, a couple of boys picked up their hands. I said, any girls? Anybody want to be a nurse? So a couple of girls put up their hands. And now guys, and this is today. These are today. So it's still like that, you know. And yet when I was in the hospital for bariatric surgery, I was praying that I wouldn't have a man, because I was afraid of, you know, like I may not be able to go to the bathroom. But I felt badly for the men, because all our lives, it's the women who've been like, they had no choice. It's like, okay, I got a woman. But today, it's the kids today are still being trained I see that with my niece, you know. Do any of the boys like pink? Woo, pink. They don't like pink. Well, why?
Which, a funny story about the color pink. You know, pink actually used to be a color for baby boys.
No, I didn't know that.
That's how pink started for babies. It was a color for baby boys, because red was considered the masculine color, and pink was a lighter version of red. It was a softer version of red.
Wow.
So I think it's funny too, like the way that kids and society genders colors, like they're colors. And also
That's
it's
why
true
yellow
that
is neutral.
And it's like, how? And then I was talking with one of my kids about this recently, and she was saying blue is neutral. Like blue is not for one or the other, but pink is still very girly. And I said, you know, it's interesting and disappointing for me that still in these narratives, that the ways that we talk in most societies, like we talk about, like, we don't want anything to be too girly. Like there's this negative connotation about the female, or like, don't you throw like a girl, you know, like that, all of that stuff.
That's
and
right.
It's still around. And it's like, well, what's wrong with it? I mean, job wise, librarians that's a good example, is that initially, of course, all librarians were men. And then the profession became more skewed towards the female gender. And then, of course, the pay, as with all professions that are predominantly female dominated, they tend to have lower pay grades. So like teaching is a good one. Nurses.
No, when I started teaching, men got paid more. Men got paid more. When 1965, the man next door got paid more than I did.
Yeah.
Really?
And this is like, and then there have been sociological studies that show that different professions, as they become more female dominated, then the pay level stays lower.
Interesting. It's
Yeah.
true.
I thought that librarians were predominantly women.
It
Yeah,
is
Our
now.
lifetime. In our
It is
lifetime.
now. Yeah.
That's right. In our lifetime.
When
But
it
when I see
started,
a man
when
at the library, there's a couple of men at the library. I'm like,
Yep.
whoa. I mean, Justin was the first one. I mean, I was so excited that, oh, great, another guy. Oh, great, great, great. I'm happy.
yeah, he works here. He's not a librarian, Justin.
No, whatever.
He
But-
works at the desk.
But we
front desk.
currently at the cote-saint-luc library, 2 of our librarians are men, and we have, I think, probably four clerks, or no, some of them have moved into other positions, but we have it's less all double X chromosome than it was when I first started here.
Look,
I think when I first started, Justin was the only
yeah.
male worker.
Katie, are
Not
bookstores
speaking what-
closing? Are bookstores closing? Like what's happening to the bookstores but the libraries are still going on? Like, you know, with this online, everybody was so afraid. What the libraries are booming and the bookstores are closing? Is that what's happening?
There have been concerns for independent booksellers for years and years and years and years. This is
Oh.
since long before COVID. I think that COVID has been really hard on any independent store
Yes.
owner. It's been challenging, but I will say that there are several independent bookstores in Montreal that are still around, and they do online business as well. There's Argo Books that's downtown. There's the Librairie
I'm talking
Verdun,
about
there's
not
St.
so much
Henry Book.
COVID, but like a Kindle. You know, you can download your book. Why do you have to go and buy a book? You know, that even before COVID. Is that-
That as well, I will say, probably 20 some years ago was my first job at a bookstore, and it was the beginning of digital books. And
Mhm.
for at least 20 years, there has been talk about, oh, this is the death of the book. This is the death of.
And it's never been.
I mean, I think that I don't know if you guys read electronically. Do you ever? I do.
I have a Kindle.
Yeah, I read electronically, but I also read real books. Real books, like physical
People
copies
say
of
they
books.
like to hold
And
the
I
book.
also listen to audiobooks. And there's so many different ways to experience it. I feel sort of like, with the advent of the book, think about Gutenberg, the Gutenberg press, right? And it's like that. Before that, the way that people read was that the literate people would, like, there would be, people standing on street corners and reading plays, or like, they would be telling the book. And then the Gutenberg press made the written word more available to everyone. And then that also then promoted literacy. So more people were learning how to read, but also, again, for a really long time, it was only upper classes. And like libraries then used to be very private. Like it wasn't just for everyone to be able to borrow a book. Some places are still like that. Their public libraries are still, you have to really jump through a lot of hoops to get memberships. I think that's, anyway. But, then with the mass market paperbacks, with pulp fiction, with like, there's always some sort of, I think in every, probably in every area of, like information or entertainment, then there's this concern that it's the death of, like now this will never be the same. And it won't be the same. It'll be different, but still somehow accessible, somehow will live on in some way or another. And if it ends up living on in a different permutation, and if bookstores end up dying, which I hope that they don't, but if everyone stopped reading physical books and all relied on digital, then what happens when there's a power outage? What happens when what happens when,
Hurricane.
or I mean, we've all, I'm sure, had issues with our technology with something getting buggy. And it's like, I like to be able to then just pick up a book that I have.
It's true.
I have a problem with,
Point.
I have a Kobo overdrive, and all of a sudden overdrive is no longer in use.
For our
And so
library.
I can't use my Kobo.
You can, but you have to, when you come into the library, you can talk with the librarian about it, but you'll have to use Adobe Digital Editions on your computer. So you'll borrow the book from Cloud Library, put it in Adobe Digital Editions, and then you can load it onto your Kobo. You can still do that.
It sounds easy but
It
for
sounds
someone who's
easy.
technically challenged.
They'll show you at the library probably.
And it's
They'll
definitely
show
one of
you.
those things, Shirley, that probably the first time that you do it, maybe even the fifth time that you do it, you're gonna be cursing. But but then it becomes
I'm gonna come
just
in
like
with my
everything else.
Kobo, and hopefully someone can help me.
Yeah, so the one little trick, and there should be actually instructions on the library website for how to access Cloud Library, like how to have borrowed books from Cloud Library and to put them on your Kobo. There should be instructions on the website under, I think, digital, like in the first banner, in the top banner across the screen, it should say like digital media or something like that.
All right, come here.
Okay,
And they should have instructions.
okay. So do I have
I
to
can't
go into
believe an hour and
Adobe
a half has
Digital
gone by.
Edition?
Yeah, so you'll have to have Adobe Digital Editions on your computer. Do you have a computer at home?
My husband uses a Mac. I have an iPad.
Okay. You'll have to do like it'll have like basically Adobe Digital Editions will have to act as the middleman for your Kobo.
Okay, so I'll come in and get instructions.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well,
An
everyone,
hour
it's
and a
been
half
a
has gone by. I
yes.
can't believe it. It's already 12 o'clock. It was so interesting.
I really enjoyed it.
Very
Rona, you
interesting,
really are
yes.
fantastic at inspiring discussions. I have to
Oh,
say,
thank you.
you ask
I
such
just-
interesting
I
questions.
can't stop talking. That's my problem, I guess.
Well, I think you're probably in decent company here.
It was wonderful.
It's been very
Shirley,
lovely.
Shirley, was this everything I said it was going to be?
Pardon?
Was it everything? Was this everything I said it was going to be? This session today?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I'm glad.
You
glad
have
you
to say
enjoyed
that.
it.
Oh, absolutely. Very enjoyable.
Well, I really
Just
appreciate,
looking
I
for
mean,
the-
every time we do one of these, I have to say my to-read list gets longer and longer. But that's all right. There's time.
Okay.
So
So the
thank you for your
invisible wall.
the invisible wall. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I think you'll like that, Shirley. It was very, very good. And I'm going to definitely read more than you ever know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the Storyteller of
Storyteller of
Casablanca.
Casablanca, The Second Life of Murray West.
And
Yes,
Lab Girl
yes.
have to read, and chemistry lesson from you.
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot. All right, well, we've got
Okay.
our work cut out for us in another 3 months at the next.
Okay. I'll
Read
see you
What
soon. Bye.
Great to see you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you, sweetie. I'll see you at the library, maybe.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.